Welcome back to That Rugby podcast, hosted by the Rugby Booth. Myself, Hughesy, back again for another week. Another exciting week of Super Rugby. Probably, as we talk about, the buys have gone and exciting rugby returns. Just to, what I'm saying and what I have been preaching is, these two extra games, you're going to find an exciting game out of them. So we can have great weeks without the buys. And we may have potentially got an answer. I don't often credit Australian rugby with a lot because they suck. But their CEO has come out with what I would consider one of the smartest bits of discussion points coming out of Australian rugby in a very long time, which is a Bledisloe Cup game on Anzac Day. Hughesy, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it was the chairman of Australian Rugby instead of Phil. I think it was Daniel Herbert, not Phil Waugh, who said it. Either way, both former Wallabies, both stand-up guys from what we've heard. Haven't heard any crazy stories like we have out of some previous RA administrators. So it's already improvement. Look, I think Anzac Day Bledisloe would be great because then you can still have sort of 2 bye weeks and you have a week off completely of competition to allow these teams to get into camp, almost do it like a state of origin type thing. They've got like a sort of week in camp, get together. You can even maybe do 2 weeks of camp and the 2 weeks off. The third week is then the Bledisloe Cup game. To give those teams times to get together, mesh, first game of the year type thing. I think it's a good idea. My only concern is then we're spreading out the Bledisloe a bit. I'm not sure how important that is though. Really, like it's just one of those things that you probably don't know what that effect will be until it's tried. My other concern is that there are already some pretty well-established Anzac fixtures. So you're trying to take away from those, I think though it's a good time to mount a challenge before it's too late. I think it could be really entertaining, and you should hopefully then get some coverage from the media about it. Get the prime ministers or deputy prime ministers there, because it's both Anzac nations. Really make it Anzac themed, make it really centric on Anzac, and I think that's a really, it's unique amongst the sports because that is actually, as much as NRL, as much as the New Zealand Warriors are playing there, that's not the national New Zealand team, right? So, even though you might have the Warriors versus an Australian team on that day, it's not the same thing as having the actual All Blacks versus the Wallabies. So you could really get a lot of behind it. I think it makes it that much more special for Anzac Day as well. It's a tradition going back to World War One, sports being reflected in war. Like the Christmas miracle in the trenches, where everyone put down their weapons and they played a game of football between the lines. So I think commemorating Anzac Day with sport is appropriate. And I think something like that, where it has the two nations involved, it's not just Aussie-centric as a lot of these other events have been. I think there were a few events that were criticised for not playing the New Zealand national anthem, which imagine doing that on Anzac Day. So hopefully this might be a way to address it a bit more, which would be great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you've just said. So a big thing for me, as a New Zealander, there isn't actually a lot of sport that happens on Anzac Day. Like you've just mentioned, it's very in Australian. Those events are Australian. I know the Warriors, as you said, play, but again, that's not a New Zealand represented team. And even in the Super Rugby, it's not as big as it is in your AFL or even the NRL with the Dragons, Roosters clash, stuff like that jumps off the page. I still remember the days of the Anzac Test in Rugby League and how great that was.
Yeah.
And I vividly remember the Kangaroos in those ugly blue-red kits and Greg Inglis setting up one of the greatest tries ever. I vividly remember those moments, and I go, I think the All Blacks and Wallabies could do it better. And I go, I actually would set it up that's our bye week. So what I would do is I'd say all Blacks, Wallabies players who get selected for that go into camp the week before. We still have a Super Rugby round. I think the reason we do that is that will build so many storylines of young players getting an opportunity for 1 week. Like we're not throwing them as much in the fire for like a whole season. It's like you've got a week where an All Black or a Wallaby is out at camp. The game happens on Anzac Day. Then they've got a week to recover. If they feel like playing it, or the rugby franchises, think that they can play it, are fit. It's like those guys that back up after Origin. If you're able to, you can. If not, it's not the end of the world. Like, being rested definitely doesn't get seen as soft after Origin. It's one of those things that I think it would be the same. And your point with the Bledisloe being a bit more spread out, I think it actually works really well, because I think we have this game as game one, and then obviously the 2 games in the Rugby Championship. And I go, this works really well, because currently we kind of have that third game that doesn't really sit in the Rugby Championship, but it's this that's and if you think about it, there was no international men's rugby on at the moment. Like, the only international game getting played at the moment is the female Six Nations. So there is no international men's game on during that week, anything leading up to it. So we would have the whole world witnessing an international rugby men's game, which we've always, every rugby fan knows, is the pinnacle of the sport, is the internationals game. And we get everyone's eyes on it for one moment, for one day. To me, it's a foregone conclusion that it would work. I think, especially hosting it in New Zealand, you would sell that out in an instant on an Anzac Day. And I'm not saying that I think you bounce it back, but we don't have like the competition like you guys do for television. But I think, as you said, it puts an opportunity on the grandest stage with the grandest moment and a Bledisloe. And I think it's hard, but let's say the Wallabies win that game. Let's just say this was a game. Let's say it was played at the MCG. Let's say we won the AFL off, but let's just say MCG, Wallabies won it. That builds a storyline for the next 2 games. The All Blacks have to win the next 2 games to retain the Shield. The Wallabies have a chance. You have so many storylines come from one game that's played on Anzac Day. Like, 3 months you've got leading up. Even if, like, the All Blacks win it, okay, the Wallabies have 2 games to right the wrongs that happened on Anzac Day. Like, the build-up for those games could be massive to me. I just think it works out really, really well. And I thought, I sat there, I go, this fixes our bye problem, because, look, we put a bye on this weekend where we go, no games. It's just the Anzac game. Everyone's off. And then to be fair, I'd still run like an all-star weekend for if this Anzac game was on, I'd still run like something on that weekend just to get the television numbers again, not to completely halt the game. And then from there you go off and you're still in the season. I just think it works perfectly for what we need to do in that middle of the season when they're desperate for a break for some reason. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Let's get it done. Rugby Australia.
Saying that, as we said, it was a very good week for rugby. I think 2 fascinating clashes by the 2 top New Zealand teams and the 2 top Australian teams, I would say. Brumbies beating my Hurricanes, which, look, it hurt. It sucked. That's the undefeated season gone, obviously. We strive for perfection. The Brumbies played good, don't get me wrong. I think the Hurricanes played bad as well. I also think that we have a little hoodoo going against the Brumbies. I think there's some voodoo lady somewhere in Canberra. She's probably a politician, but she's got a voodoo doll of the Hurricanes, and she's stabbing it. Like, that's the only... We've lost 5 of the last 6 games against the Brumbies. I just sit there and go...
Yeah, it's whatever they're doing, they seem to have the Hurricanes number. And look, this season it might be more important than ever, considering Hurricanes are currently top of the table. Hot in the heels, though, are the Blues, who beat the Reds in a game that the Reds... there's not many games that you look at and you could say, yep, this team should have won that game, and they lost it themselves. Not the referee, not even really the other team. They lost it themselves. The Reds absolutely did that, and multiple opportunities, from the fucked up put down by Suliasi Vunivalu, and it's just like that. You're a winger. That's like your one job. And so that would have won the game, to the end sequence of plays where they had the ball, they had a penalty, they got the line, they had the ball in hand, and then they fumbled it and allowed the Blues to run upfield and score a try. Like, you didn't even have the decency to jump on the ball after you fumbled it away to kill the play and force the Blues to make a set play to reset your defensive line. Just an absolute, and there were multiple instances where that happened, where the Reds just let the Blues back in, and it was an absolute shambles from the Reds. Sort of a very to be expected thing by the Reds, though. To be fair, this season is that they seem to go to a bit to shambles when the pressure's really ratcheted up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they again. I think it's a good sign for the Reds that like you've just said, they lost that game rather than anyone else lost the game for them. Like they can't blame the ref. They can't blame. I think they beat the Blues is the way I'd be thinking about it. Obviously, the scoreline doesn't represent that, but to do that, because I think the Blues are the best team at the comp. As much as I rate my Hurricanes, the Blues put 40 on the Brumbies. They are the best attacking team in the comp by far. Defensively, I think we're better than them, and that's what showed when we played them, but we played them at home. And I'm very cautious to say that, obviously, for the Hurricanes to win the Super Rugby tournament, I think it needs to run through the Cape Town, as terrible of a stadium as the Cape Town is in Wellington, and the lack of advantage it would give any home team is null and void. But I think it needs to run through that, because I think if it goes through Eden Park, I think a lot of teams are going to struggle to go to Eden Park and get a win like that. Well, they're turning that into a fortress.
2 weeks' time, you'll have the opportunity to secure it. That's when you have to go up to Eden Park and give that a shot. Yeah, look, from sort of an Australian perspective, looking at the other games, Rebels got toasted by the Crusaders. I think we're all sort of expecting that, but maybe not as terrible and one-sided score as it ended up being.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I've seen the highlight reel that the Crusaders have now posted of the scrums. And I just sat there and I go, what the absolute fuck was that? Like, Taniela Tupou's on one side of the scrum. You can't sit there and say that it was, again, I'm no front rower. I'm not going to sit here and say I know the perfect science of scrums. But whatever they did to send the scrums going the other way, that was amazing to me. And I go, I know it's like an All Black front row when you look at it, but they haven't been doing that this whole season. And that set the tone, 39-0. And I don't want to, I'm trying not to bring it back into the world again and mention it, but I did say last week, look, Crusaders go on a run, they finish 8th. Maybe I'm not so unhappy that we lost to the Brumbies and we don't finish first, because if that's the team you have to play, and I know they're 0-6 away, and I know then this is what gives me faith that the Crusaders aren't going to win the title this year, is the fact that they are winning at home. I don't think they'll get beaten at home again for the rest of this year. And the Crusaders fans, credit to them, because they came out in force again. They're willing this team to get into the finals, and they will get into the finals. I have zero doubt that I think they'll win all the rest of their home games. They'll snatch an away game against like the Highlanders, who showed that they play the most dull rugby along with the Force in the most dull game of a 7-6, 13 points. There wasn't a point scored until the 38th minute. That's just unprofessional, just about. I go, the Crusaders are making it, and I wouldn't like to be the team facing them in the finals in the first week.
Yeah. Well, another finals-bound team seems to be the Chiefs, who went up against the Waratahs. Waratahs is it's a very frustrating season. It's just it's what I said before the season started is how it's happening. We just don't have the forward stocks to compete with these teams. Now, there has been a decimation of injuries, particularly amongst the hooker position, but it's not just that. It's the front row as a whole, especially with the loss of Angus Bell. It's just not holding up to standard. And yeah, it's just rough times to be a Waratahs fan right now. Definitely needs to be a replenishment in the forward pack. And Hannigan's playing well. Lockie Swindon's playing really well out of there, which I'm pleasantly surprised about. But there's a lack of depth in there that really needs to be addressed. So it's rough times to be a Waratahs fan. It's not getting any easier this week when they go visit you lot. Then we host the Brumbies away to the Force. Where are we next? Away to Moana Pacifica, and finish off hosting the Reds. So there's a couple of winnable games in there that could see us sneak into the final. Like, we only need to win 3 games. 5 games gets you into the finals, as we say. So, but it's going to be a tough ask for all of those games.
Yeah, look, it's one of those seasons. It's a what if season for the Waratahs. I feel like, what if we had won that game? What if we had won that game? And again, they were in that fight against the Crusaders for the first half at least.
Yeah.
And then Crusaders, the Chiefs for the first half at least, and then ran away with it. But yeah, it's one of those seasons. I think you'll look back and go, what if we'd won that game, and then would this have changed that and that? So look, it's an interesting year because I don't know. Beating the Crusaders twice again, as we say, is an achievement in itself. But does that? I'm going to put you on the spot. What happens at the end of the season with Darren Coleman?
It really depends on what, like, if they get into the finals, I think he retains his spot. Even if they miss out by a point differential, I reckon he might keep his job. If they just miss out the finals, I don't think you could keep him. It's a going backwards of the team. They've gotten into the finals every year of his tenure. If they don't make it, but they haven't improved from there, and if they step backwards now, then it's probably time to move on. And I don't know if it's necessarily all on the coach. And in fact, I would say it's definitely not all on the coach. There's other areas that the Waratahs need to improve, recruitment, etc. But the coach bears ultimate responsibility. Yeah,
fair enough. I do. I think I go as much as I agree with you. Like, it's hard. He's realistically on we've got 5-6 games left, 5-game trial. Like, that's what he's got left to prove that he can do the job. Because, yeah, it's interesting. It is a tricky time for the Waratahs. Saying that, I did just want to quickly touch base. You probably saw it as well in the Reds. Tim Ryan, who had one of the all-time starting debuts.
Junkyard dog.
Yeah. Look, it's interesting because we've kind of gone from a position of vulnerability. You think back to when you were sitting in the Rugby World Cup squad with wingers, and then all of a sudden you've got these, I would say, at least 3 frobbers chucking their names up with Tim Ryan, Corey Toole, and the Rebels winger, I've forgotten his name.
Darby Lancaster.
That's the one. Darby. All 3 of them, and again, as Darby was played in a well-beaten Rebels side, so it's hard to stand out on that. But all 3 of them have kind of... Corey Toole obviously was already great last year, but putting their names right in the mix. And I know Darby and Tim Ryan, I think, are like 20 years old, and Corey Toole's probably not that old either. So... Look, it's a changing of the guard just about, and you like your quick white wingers, you Aussies, don't you? Reminiscent of Drew Mitchell, Adam Ashley Cooper type style winger. So look, there's a couple of players coming through that definitely showed some excitement and reasons to be excited for the future of Australian rugby. And I think that's why I'm still in awe of this Les Kiss appointment. I think it's such a fantastic hire by the Reds because I think, given time, he's going to build that team into a championship winning team. And they're so youthful in that roster that I think the more and more he gets his hands on them, they're going to be something special. I think 3-4 years down the line, I see a Queensland Reds Super Rugby Championship coming their way. Let's move on to what I would say is building the ideal XV. Now, what we discussed last week, which was quite funny, quite good timing to discuss a Bledisloe XV for halfway in the season point, and then the mention of the Anzac Bledisloe Cup game came up. So I thought, if we had our ideal world where you could pick not any player, but the specific skill set for a player, who would you put and where would you put them type situation? So like, for an example, there's lots of hookers out there and there's different types of hookers. You've got the mobile, skillful hooker, Dane Coles or Safo Amoha, and then you've got the, I would say, bigger technical hooker and like a Jamie George type, or even you've got the additional flanker, Malcolm Marks type hooker who can do the job but also seems to steal ball like he's a number 7. So what we're going to do is run through our building the ideal XV. Hughes is going to choose the forwards and what he'd look through for a forward pack. I will run you through the backs as I'm back. He's a forward. Makes sense. Hughes, start us off.
Yeah, so for my props, what I want is scrum technicians. I want a front row that could dominate a scrum, right? Because that is such a huge momentum thing for a team, and it's such a confidence thing knowing that you can go into a scrum and earn penalties or put the other team off their game. It's huge, right? It's really big. So that's, for me, that's what I'm looking for my props, is props for the ability to dominate a scrum. Hooker, I do like what you said about mobile hookers. Watching Asafa Amoa this season it's just, and some of the great hookers of Australia as well. God, I'm forgetting his name now. But my brother literally did a camp with him. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting his name. But yeah, I do like my mobile hookers because you can make a play off the line out. You know, one of my favorite plays in rugby is the hooker throws it in the line out, the lock jumps up, grabs it, and chucks it back down to the hooker who speeds along that little channel on the outside there. And it's just, you can really catch teams off guard with it. And I think it makes such a difference because mobile as well, you got a heavy work rate then. You can get to those breakdowns. You know, your props might be a little bit bigger, but you still get that front row presence by having a hooker there as well. Yeah, so I love myself a mobile hooker. I know you're doing your research now.
Trying to pull them up, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna find it here. Tatafu Polotanau.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I had to get the name up.
Yep.
Yeah, Tatafu Polotanau. Yeah, loved him. Right. Moving on to locks. I mean, obviously you got to have a tall fucker in there. That's no doubt about that. I like myself a lock I sort of like a Scott Barrett bastard hooker, and a bastard lock. God, I'm getting myself mixed up. And I also like a Will Skelton as well. Both tall, but what I love from Will Skelton in the Wallabies World Cup team, he's one of the only good players. But he used his enormous frame to just simply lean over rucks and be able to pilfer balls. I think that's a tremendous skill. A frame like that as well, it makes such a difference when you're picking and driving for on the goal line scoring tries as well. So that's what I'm looking for in a lock. Your six has got to be the craziest person in your forward pack. Has got to be a psycho, right? Your six is your psycho, and your seven is your wasp. Your seven is your jackal, getting in there, creating turnovers, being a pest. Your six, your seven's the pest, and then when your seven gets shoved because the other team's sick of him, your six comes in third man in, swinging from the side. So that's what you want, a hard hitting six, with some ball running skills. Your seven, you want to break down pest. The number eight is a bit of it's sort of like, how do you define different types of number eights, right? Like for me, it's like, I feel like it's a bit of a singular position. It's a bit of a combo position. Like it's hard to define archetypes within the number eight spot. I guess I like a running eight is probably a way to describe it. I mean, probably everyone does as well. You know, I want an eight that's great at running the ball. It's sort of my all-round Mr. Fix-It, where there's, you know, can do a little bit of everything, but does it all well. So, yeah, I guess that's what I look for in a number eight.
Nice, yeah, I agree with that. And the number six, one of the guys was saying, your number six is one of those guys on the field where he'll absolutely smoke you, get up, tell you about it, and then you're not actually sure if, like, you push him back, he will take a swing. Like, you're like, he is nutty enough to get himself sent off. Yeah, because he's just absolutely got nothing going on in his head. Like it's just emptiness in there. So that's what you need from your six. And I put like, and as players of example, Lockie Swinton, Jerry Collins, where they'd hit you so hard and you're not sure if they're actually trying to kill you. And I think there's a great example coming through the Chiefs now in Samapini Finau. Saw his massive hit on Tane Edmund, and you're just like, that guy, I think if you pushed him enough, he would just try and kill you. Like there's a screw loose. There's got to be a screw loose to play number six. Moving on to mine and then the back line. Scrum half. There's a couple choices. You've got the ball running scrum half, which I kind of put as like your TJ Perenara. I think he's a runner. Cam Roigard likes to move the ball. You've got your accurate, skillful scrum half, great passer, and like an Aaron Smith. And then you've got what I would consider like a box kicking scrum half, you know, your Danny Cares, Ben Youngs, all of those guys. And then you've got Antoine Dupont, who does it all really well. Obviously, you take the one who does it all really well. But if I'm choosing a team, I'm obviously a New Zealander, so I'm not big on box kicking. I like I would love a running scrum half, but I think I'm going to go with the accurate one. I just want someone who can deliver a perfect pass 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Make sure they're hitting the line, an Aaron Smith level type player.
As an Australian rugby fan, I would take one of those in a heartbeat. It's been lacking in Australian rugby, seriously has been, is the you watch Bledisloe Cup games, you watch the difference between the Wallabies nines and Aaron Smith, right? Aaron Smith's putting it on the money at speed every time, right? No ducks, no like lame half speed passes. It's there, not too high, not too short, on the chest, ready to go. Just crisp, and it flows. It flows like water. So yeah, I'm 100% agreement with that.
Yeah. I think that's, in my mind, that's the best 9 for the team we're building here. 10, you've got your 10, and there's kind of two options. You have your Maverick, who's a bit of a running 10, or your game manager 10. When you're thinking about Mavericks, you're thinking your Finn Russells, those ones that could set up anything, your Richie Mwangas on any given moment. And then you got your game managers 10, your Andre Pollards, your Johnny Wilkinsons. And then you got the 10 that can do both, which is like Dan Carter. I would still say Dan Carter's a game managing 10 who had the ability to run the ball. I'm big on a game managing 10. And the reason I do that is because I think you can get those runners elsewhere. Andre Pollard can still run the ball, and Johnny Wilkinson could still run the ball, but it wasn't their main facet of play. And I like a game managing 10. I just think it takes pressure off your 4-pack, takes pressure off your back line as well. And we'll run into why I like that. Because if I go to I'm going to go to my centres, then I'll do my back 3. If I go to my 12, there's kind of two options here. There's the ball playing Owen Farrell, second 10 playing 12, or you've got your game breaker, trash can, run hard, kill people, Ma'ananu, Name Lamape, type 12s. And I'm big on, I want my number 12 to be clean up man. I want them to be so solid in carrying the ball, ability to step. Yeah, they can kick and pass if needed. Ma'ananu showing it. But their first job is going to be run over, through, around someone, and that's what I want from my 12. So that's why I need a 10 to be a game manager, because I don't need him to run the ball if I've got a 12 doing that. 13, you have like similar type situation, less of a playmaker 13, but you have the 13 who's a Manu Tuolangi, runs hard, runs over people. If you don't have a 12 that's doing it, you need a 13 that's doing it, or you have a defensive maestro, I would say 13, a Conrad Smith like 13, and then I think Lacano Arm in the same breath is one of those skillful 13s that can break a game open type players. I like a defensive maestro 13. I look at Gal Fakal and what he does for France. I look at Conrad Smith, what he did for the All Blacks so many times. I'm looking at a player like Josh Fluke, who's got the ability to, if he can get his defensive work up, to be one of those players that can break a game open, but can also be a defensive lever for the Reds. And it's interesting, I look at someone like Riki Ioana, who's kind of a mixture. He can defend, and he defends really well. He can break a game open because he's got that wingers aspect, and he also, even for a small frame, loves to try and run over people. So I look at someone like that and I go, that's an interesting prospect, but I just like the defensive anchor. I think if you've got your ball runner 12, if you can shut a game down from 13 with your defense, you're in the right position. Wingers. I like a game-breaking, speedy winger. I've put Cheslin Kobe as the example there. Either a good step or extremely fast. Corey Toole, you're thinking about there. Severis, going to break the game open, going to do the job there. Is what I'm looking for one of my wingers. The other winger, there's lots you could go here. You could go your George Bridge or McNichol with, highly skilled players. Bread and butter will score tries on the wing. You could go down off your big beastly winger, Ndolo, Jonah Lomu, things like that. I love a winger like that. But what I've actually kind of bracketed here is that Fijian winger. And every team wants that, one of those Fijian wingers. Yeah. Now, I mentioned Severis, but I'm going like the Mark Talia, Semi Radradra type winger that every single team would want.
Marika Carbetti. Missing one there.
I was waiting for you to jump in. I
was waiting for you to do it, to not mention him.
So those Fijian wingers that are explosive, incredibly skilled, break tackles, derail, score tries, give crazy offloads. That's what I want on my other wing. fullback was a hard one because fullback you've got, again, your option where you can go, play it safe. Ben Smith, like tactically brilliant, basically another winger. Or do you go another playmaker like a Bowden Barrett in there? I see Willie LaRue kind of is that type of player. Or if we're looking at the other example, Damien Vilmensa for South Africa, all of those. Or do you go for like a goal-kicking merchant as well? So you look at Thomas Ramos from France. England have been having this issue, I guess, a little bit with Freddie Stewart starting, and I can't remember who took over towards the back end of the Six Nations, but he was more of a ball runner than that safety net. I like a fullback because I've got that 10 that's a game manager. I think I would prefer a safety net at the back, Ben Smith type. You know, he can play an additional winger. The way I look at it is a bit like Will Jordan, tall, will win most high ball contests, can break a game open with his speed and skill, and can slot into a wing pretty easily as well. So that's what I'm looking for my backline. Cusey, you just off the top of your head, anything you'd change, anything you see different?
No, I think we're on a similar pages here with the type of team that we like. Maybe it's just because we're Southern Hemisphere and that's the type of rugby that we play down here. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I guess the other thing you can think about at 15, which is really important, of course, is defense. You know, do you just go someone who is just an absolute bulwark, just 100% tackle rate, never misses a tackle, fast enough to run down, your breaking plays and things like that. I think that's an option, and some teams definitely look for their fullbacks to do that. But I think more and more, and it's probably more prevalent, is that the fullback needs to be a playmaker more than their defense. But no, otherwise, I think we're pretty much on the same page there.
Nice. Running into our last thing today, Premiership Rugby, obviously England's top div, have released their stats for payment and salary, and this is really cool. They've got like a whole like pamphlet article where they literally run through everything, like the salary cap, what salaries, where it's being used, average pay per player, average pay per position. And so I just thought it was really interesting, and we'll run through the position players first now that we've just built our XV to show you how much it would cost. So the highest paid position for 22-23, and it was the same for 21-22, is fly half first five at £217,761. This is the average pay per that position. Second is centre, which I was quite interested on. I didn't think centres were rated this highly, but they're 178,755. Lock was 174,785. Fullback was fourth. Back row was fifth. Prop was sixth. Hooker was seventh. Wing was eighth at 127,000. And scrum half was last at about just a tad over 120,000 average.
I'm literally typing in these figures now into a calculator to see how much it would cost to put a team together of starting XV, an average XV lineup. All right. The scrum half, I have to say, surprised me the most. Seeing them down the bottom, really, really threw me for a loop.
I'm the same. I thought about that, and then I started to think, and I go, actually, when you think about scrum half specifically in England, there's not like Alex Mitchell's the one that jumps out of the page, and other than that, you've got like Danny Kerr, who's 37 years old. There's not a lot of like when you look at fly halves, you've got Andre Pollard, you've got Finn Russell, are both playing in there, going to be lifting up that number. So it's not like there's no big scrum half that's been brought in from another country to lift that number up. So I thought that same. I thought the same about wingers, but it's the same with wingers there. Wingers are like this, are less of a commodity to bring players in and play on the wing than a position like fly half or even lock or even fullback and back row.
I thought prop would have been higher.
That was the one that I was shocked. I was
limited, just like lock, limited number of humans who can play that position, like limited people that have the body shape and the fitness to do that. So I would have thought prop would be higher. Prop and scrum half are the ones that most surprised me.
I think the reason that prop gets dropped, because I think that I would guarantee teams carry a shitload of props. And so my assumption is there'll be some props there that are academy-like players that are still on the salary cap, because you just, again, like you said, there's only a certain amount of people in the world that can do that. And you have to carry those players to make sure you're abiding by the rugby laws and stuff. So I imagine there's a hell of a lot of props actually in the salary cap calculation.
Yeah.
So that probably drops again the number. But again, like, I look at back row and I thought back row was a little low. Like, again, I understand fly half, and I imagine Andre Pollard, Marcus Smith, and even Owen Farrell, and when you're starting to yell these names out, Finn Russell, those are four guys that I wouldn't be surprised they're earning over $500,000 per year. So £500,000, should I say. So, like, that number's going to rise pretty high when you've got players like that, when I can start to list off those names.
Yeah.
But Centre surprised me as well.
Yeah. Well, I've done the calculations. So the price to have your average starting XV on the field in the Premiership is £2.365 million. So specifically £2,365,132 sterling. That's just for the starting XV. So, not cheap at all.
Not at all. I'm just Googling. So that, how much was that?
2.365 million pounds.
So, and this is interesting. I just typed in the Super Rugby salary cap, which is 5.5 million Australian dollars. So that would roughly, I think, would be above what an average starting team. And again, this is the salary cap. We're talking about the average starting team here. But it is interesting. Like, again, Premiership rugby over here is in an interesting position. A 10-team comp, again, as I sit here and talk, no team can go up at the moment because no team in the Championship can meet the regulations needed to be in the Premiership. So they don't have a big enough stadium. Ealing Trailfinders are the next closest, and they win the comp like just about every year. They lost last year, but most years they win, and they can't go up because they don't have a big enough stadium and this and that. So it's at this dead rubber point where there's 10 teams and they're not moving, and this is the 10 teams they've got. So they're at an interesting point, Premiership rugby, and as we've seen London Irish Wasps fold and struggle monetary wise, and even Wasps potentially making a comeback and going to join the URC if they can get their way. So there's lots going on with Premiership rugby, but I just thought, interesting in terms of...
Well, speaking of salaries, let's do another comparison here. Lewis Rees-Zammit, who's signed with the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL, his yearly salary is £712,000. So that is more than triple the fly half average.
Yeah, it's 7 times the winger average as well.
Yeah, so it's a third of a starting XV. So it's 5 players worth of salary.
There you go. All right, guys. If you're aspiring rugby player, get high enough up so you can join the international players pathway and sign an NFL contract. Is that what you're saying?
It's a smart move. It's the only logical move.
You don't have years of the same head trauma that they go through smashing helmets together.
Yeah, you're a lot smarter than the rest of those players.
Exactly. That is us for this week on That Rugby podcast. We are now getting to the sticky end. I say the sticky end of this Super Rugby season, but there's so many. I think every team can still qualify for the finals.
Yeah.
So I imagine once we start to number those down, we'll get there, but that'll be in the next couple of weeks. But for now, thank you for joining us. I have been Luke. That has been Husey. We have been That Rugby podcast. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Peace.